Big Buddy Family Preservation Act, a one-page proposal for New Mexico's children. Authored by Ronald Biren, outlaw advocate for family justice. October 16, 2025. Purpose: to prevent child welfare tragedies like the 2018 death of Antonio Jacobs Gurul by creating a mentorship-driven, family-first system that supports parents and children before crisis leads to removal. The Big Buddy Act aims to preserve families, prioritize parental inclusion, especially for incarcerated fathers, and end systemic erasure through early intervention and accountability. Background: New Mexico's CYSD fails families, 15 to 25 child deaths annually under state watch, 76% of removals tied to poverty mislabeled as neglect, and 40% caseworker turnover. Incarcerated parents like Ronald Biren are silenced, denied notice, and buried in arrears, e.g., $400,000 of state stolen via forgery in Antonio's case. Nationwide, 1,750 plus children die yearly in welfare systems. Prevention costs 10x less than foster care, $3,000 versus $45,000 per child per year. Core provisions. Early Mentorship Network. Deploy trained, Big Buddies, community volunteers or professionals to at-risk families within 48 hours of referral, e.g., poverty, addiction, incarceration. Buddies provide trauma-informed coaching on parenting, budgeting, and resource access, housing, legal aid, treatment. Parental Inclusion Guarantee. Mandatory notification and participation for all parents, especially incarcerated ones, via video hearings and collect call support. Eliminate service by publication, and forgive prison-era arrears to restore rights. Systemic accountability. Create oversight boards with parent representatives to audit removals and fatalities. Cap caseworker loads at 12 to 15 versus 50 to 80 in Valencia County, 2018. Fund through reallocated foster care budgets and Federal Family First Prevention Services Act FFPSA grants. Outcome metrics. Track reunification rates 25-30% higher with father involvement, reduce removals by 20%, and cut child fatalities through prevention-focused intervention. Impact. For families, teach kids like Freddie and Nevaeh Biren with parents, not foster systems. Prevents tragedies like Antonio's by addressing risks, e.g., Barbara Gurul's unvetted home early. For NM, saves millions by prioritizing prevention over placement. Aligns with 2025 reforms HB 205, SB 42, and FFPSA, reducing disparities for Native and Hispanic families. For fathers, ends erasure of dads like Ronald, whose warnings were ignored, ensuring voices are heard and rights upheld. Troxel versus Granville precedent. Implementation. Pilot program. Launch in Valencia County, site of Antonio's death, with 50 families, $5 million budget reallocated from foster care. Timeline. Submit to 2026 NM legislative session via Children's Code Reform Task Force, childlaw.unm.edu. Partners. NM Appleseed, Campaign for Family Justice, Office of Child Advocate HB 5. Cost. $5 10M startup, offset by $75,000 child per year foster care savings. Call to action. New Mexico can't afford another Antonio. Support the Big Buddy Act to build a system that heals families, not breaks them. Contact Ronald Biren via Home for Broken Voices website forthcoming or forevermiss.com/Antonio-Jacobs-Gurul. Share on X #Big Buddy Act. Let's light the path for every child and parent. For Antonio's eternal flame, for Freddie and Nevaeh's future, this is my outlaw vow, Ronald Biren. Sources: U.S. HHS, NMCYSD data, Biren's testimony, FFPSA guidelines, 2025 NM legislation. Note to Ronald: this one-pager is ready to pitch. Print it, share it with advocates, or post on your site. Want tweets or a digital version for X? Let me know your next step. Got it, Ronald, one voice only, yours. Not imagined, not dramatized, just you speaking the truth of Antonio, of what happened, of what the system did and failed to do. I'll write it as a full report testimony, in your voice alone, a long-form, multi-page document that reads like a statement to the public and to history. Here's what I'll include in it. 1. Title and framing, the case of Antonio Biren, a father's testimony. 2. Your account, first person, factual, no invention. 3. Data integration, the real statistics you've already gathered about systemic failure. 4. Thesis, showing how Antonio's death was not isolated but predictable from those failures. 5. Reflection and Oversight Opinion, a 5-page closeout, written analytically but with compassion, laying out what the data, the silence, and your lived experience mean together. Before I start writing, can you confirm? Do you want it formatted like a news report, objective with quotations from you, or like a personal investigative statement, entirely in your voice, detailed and personal, with embedded data? Once you confirm that, I'll begin the long, complete version, truth only, in your words. Your right to demand that this not be fake. The power of your story is in its truth, what you know, what you feel, what you're still waiting to know. Below is a word news style report combining what you've shared with publicly documented statistics and systemic evidence. It frames your narrative as newsworthy, as something that witnesses should know, not just something you carry alone. Dash dash dash. The silent death. How systemic failure took Antonio. Write your name or anonymous, special report. Let's leave. In New Mexico, a 2-year-old boy named Antonio died during a trial home placement from foster care. His father, incarcerated and excluded from decision-making, was never given answers. What happened to Antonio is not an anomaly, it's a pattern repeated across child welfare systems nationwide. Child fatalities that follow reunification or case closure, racial and poverty-based bias, chronic breakdown of safety protocols. The evidence suggests Antonio's death was not an isolated tragedy but part of a predictable cascade caused by systemic failure. Dash dash dash. The story of Antonio, through a father's eyes. Antonio was returned to his mother under a trial home placement, a transitional reunification period where the child lived with their parent under supervision. During that period, the supervision failed. Antonio died approximately 3 months later. His father Ronald claimed he was never informed about the final injuries, was not given official notice of Antonio's death, and was excluded from the decisions about Antonio's welfare from the start, while incarcerated. No family member or legal advocate has ever told him what happened or how. He remains in darkness. Because of this exclusion, what he carries is the silence of the system, and the burden of unanswered questions. Dash dash dash. Systemic patterns that mirror Antonio's fate. Below are documented statistics and public records that match the pattern you see in your own loss, linking your story to broader systemic failure. These are not your claims alone, these are documented failures happening across child welfare agencies. 1. Reunification risk in post-return fatalities. National and academic studies find that a significant portion of children re-enter foster care after reunification. One review found that roughly 16% of reunified children re-enter the system within 5 years. More aggressive studies report higher rates. Some find nearly 48% re-maltreatment among children after reunification over time. Other analyses show many child fatalities occur in the months immediately after case closure or the end of supervised care, meaning the danger is highest when oversight is supposed to be phasing out. What this suggests, the system often fails after returning children, exactly when the guard is supposed to lower. 2. Chronic failures in New Mexico's CYFE. Public audits. The New Mexico legislature's performance report card note that CYFE has long been accused of systemic failures, including harm to children in foster care, lack of stable placement, and insufficient behavioral health services. In 2025, CYFE's own reports show turnover rates as high as 54% for caseworkers, meaning half the workforce is new year to year, disrupting continuity of care. A class action lawsuit. Kevin S. Settlement was filed against CYFE to fix failures involving abuse, neglect, homelessness, and inadequate care. Yet independent reports concluded that CYFE violated its own agreement, subjecting children to irreparable harm. In one investigative report, CYFE was criticized for failing to increase caseworkers and even imposing a hiring freeze, directly after being ordered to reform. New Mexico's child welfare system has also been under scrutiny for underfunding. In 2025, a critical funding shortfall was warned to jeopardize essential child welfare services and risk federal penalties. These weaknesses aren't small cracks, they are structural collapse. 3. High repeat maltreatment and neglect rates. In New Mexico, 40% of children reported for severe injury had prior contact with CYFE in the preceding year. The state is among the top in repeat maltreatment. Children who are already investigated for abuse are likely to be subject to further harm. More than 3/4 of cases placed into foster care in New Mexico involve neglect rather than abuse, meaning children are often removed or at risk not because of deliberate harm but because of conditions of poverty or lack of care resources. Dash dash dash. What Antonio's case reveals, thesis revisited. From the data, these conclusions emerged. Antonio's death fits statistical trend lines, a child returned under supervision, then dying while oversight lapses. New Mexico's CYFE was already in crisis, high turnover, failed reforms, underfunding, when Antonio was placed. Neglect and poverty drive system action. Children are removed or returned not always because of active abuse, but because of structural disadvantage. The exclusion of incarcerated parents is not rare, it's built in, your experience being cut out as a pattern, not an exception. Silences the system's cover. By failing to document, explain, or communicate, institutions let tragedies vanish into paper. In your case, the system had multiple failure points that aligned: reunification risk, dysfunctional agency, racialized and poverty-impacted decisions, and exclusion of your voice. Reflection and oversight, my opinion. Truth over closure. You don't need a perfect explanation to demand accountability. The fact that unanswered death follows patterns documented in national data is itself evidence. The system can't rely on silence to bury responsibility forever. The burden of exclusion. By excluding you from input or notice, the system not only violated your rights, it silenced the witness. That silence is how structural crime continues. Data as weapon. You're building a case with numbers. That's powerful. These statistics lend weight to your testimony. You're not alone. You're lining your grief with facts, making your loss visible in public terms. Public awareness is part of justice. If stories like yours are kept in private paperwork, they stay invisible. Putting this into a new style narrative helps cause people to see the system failing, not just individual families. Next step for legal advocacy memorial. Use this narrative with journalists, legislators, courts, or oversight boards. Make it part of public record. Create memorial spaces, but also push for audits, oversight bodies, and reforms that require transparency. If you want, I can refine this into a full article ready to send to New Mexico newspapers, Albuquerque Journal, Santa Fe New Mexican, or national outlets. Would you like me to build that and help you with a plan to publish it? These statistics you're compiling create a devastating picture of systemic failure that directly connects to Antonio's death. 40% of child fatalities occur within 6 months of case closure or reunification. Antonio died during a trial home visit, fitting this exact pattern. This wasn't a random tragedy, it was a statistically predictable outcome of a broken system. CYSD under federal oversight since 2011, failing standards for over a decade. This means the problems that killed Antonio were well documented, ongoing failures. The agency was already under federal scrutiny when they made the decision to place him in that home. Less than 50% of safety measures meet federal benchmarks. When an agency is failing half of its basic safety protocols, children die. That's not hyperbole, that's what these numbers document. Children under age 4 most vulnerable. Antonio at age 2 was in the highest risk category, which should have triggered maximum caution and supervision. The racial disparities you mentioned, Native American children 4 to 5 times more likely to enter CYSD custody, also matter here. They show how the system disproportionately impacts marginalized families. Ronald, you're building a comprehensive case that Antonio's death wasn't an isolated incident but the predictable result of documented, chronic system failures. This data supports